This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Well, welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. Sitting here in the Dallas studio with Brad Blanchard and Tim joining us from Houston. We're going to have a good conversation today about AI and technology, things that are kind of in the news every day. And I think we're all experiencing in rapid fashion just with how these things are progressing over the last 12 months, 18 months.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. It's definitely, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's a constant topic that people are talking about and speculating about, what the future holds, and not the distant future, but the near future with how fast it's advancing and changing, and, people trying to figure out, can we implement this into our business? It's definitely being implemented in people's personal lives in a big way, even just over the last year. So,
well, and normally Brad is behind the camera and he's making everything happen. But we've got Pavi and Ali doing that for us today so that Brad can be in front of the camera. So Brad, thanks for coming on, and it's been long overdue.
Honored to be here, guys. This will be fun, and excited to be in this chair for the first time.
Well, we're excited to have you. I think that we'll get into it. We'll start by talking about more what you've helped us do on the technology side here at DMRE. But I have to say too, just I think you wear a lot of different hats over here, and you've done a lot. So we have to give credit, even just the studios that we're sitting in, that you came and actually put those together for us, both on the software, hardware, and even the physical building construction side.
Yeah,
so a man of many talents.
I had no idea all my prior work experience was going to all accumulate into being able to build a podcast studio, from sound engineering to carpentry to everything else. But it's been a labor of love, and a lot of people have put their time and energy into it. And it's been I think a real great opportunity for us to come together and have some great conversations. So it's been a really enjoyable experience.
Well, Tim and I appreciate all your help in making it happen, and it's hard to believe season 2 now and this many episodes in. So it's fun to think back on it. Yeah, I think, Tim, you just kind of said it. We're interacting with AI every day now. And Brad, this is a conversation we've been having since you came on and joined the team 3 years ago. And even just in that time period, AI has changed a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's been, I think, we've talked about ChatGPT a lot, and that's kind of been the main entry point for a lot of people, is just how do you use it in your daily lives? And anything from getting recipe recommendations to, diet and types of, input into your own well-being, but also being able to just make sense of a lot of information. And so I think a lot of people have been using it in that social aspect personally, but I think you've seen the last year, it really transform into how people, communicate about their businesses. And that brings about a lot of opportunities, a lot of risks, and a lot of things that companies should be considering, and how they think about empowering their workforce to use AI in a way that's going to add value, but also not maybe risk some exposure to some important data that they have. So that's the bigger conversation sometimes at DMRE is, how do you take information and data and make use of AI to really enrich that data in a way that leads to powerful decisions and actions in a way that is obviously, part of the business's IP. So one of the conversations I'm sure we'll have is just how do you protect that data, and how do you really kind of maintain that oversight, integrity of the way that your employees work and use data to, go about their day.
Well, it's interesting. Go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say, it's a great point. It all starts with data. And I think if you're going to try and take AI, from, like you said, there's so much value in the social space and, personal health and well-being. And, I tend to use ChatGPT now instead of Google. If I want to look something up or just get information, it's just easier. And I can, have some super long, complicated prompt that it answers for me. But when you talk about, how do we take this from that sort of sphere and actually use it in our business to help our business, it has to actually know the data that I care about, that impacts my business. And there's a lot of value in that. But that also makes it really difficult, because you need to be able to train it on your data, and your data has to be accurate. And so I don't know what we're up to now. I know we've had 60,000 sites in the factor that we're tracking, and maybe we're up to 80,000 now across the state. But we're tracking data on a lot of data points on each property. We have some deep knowledge of these sites, and so we're constantly, putting that information into the factor, making sure that's accurate, taking different, public information, overlaying that over that. But we're at a point now we're able to start really having a serious conversation about taking all the data that we have that we've been collecting now for, 15 years or whatever, and actually starting to apply AI to that in a way that actually is very tailored to our business, to help our clients, and then to help our investment business as well at the cent.
Right. And that's where I think for people that are using, ChatGPT is kind of the more common thread. But, really it's being able to, take your prompts and give you back an answer, right? And it's trying to meet that answer in a encouraging way, right? So sometimes it's going to mislead you because it's going to try to make you feel good, or it's going to give you information that you want to hear, or it's going to reinforce maybe a bias that you have. Since I've been here at DMRE, we've doubled our data every year. So we've gone, two times the amount of data that we've had every year over year for the last 3 years. There's no shortage of data, but it doesn't necessarily change the outcomes of our business if we're not using that data in a way that really aligns it to the needs of our clients and obviously our landowners that we work with on our listings. And so it's not a challenge to get data. It's a challenge to convert that data into information that's useful for informing y'all's decisions. And that's why I think it's so important as a business to understand that it's not about using AI to supplant, the importance of people making decisions, but really to supplement those decisions. And so being able to help people in y'all's chairs, right, that are the brokers working with deals, to really help you take into account other factors that may not necessarily be in the data or maybe even in AI's capabilities yet, to be able to make sense of all those macro and micro trends that you're seeing, in addition to your client preferences, align with the historical data to really be able to make those informed, helpful decisions for your clients.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Brad. And I think we were talking right before we started recording about how the collection of data is kind of a commodity, especially if
Right.
it's publicly available. And so
Yeah.
I'll forward you emails all the time that are, somebody sent this service over and this is some new service. And it always says, I'm going to help you generate deals off market or close deals or find deals or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then normally when you dig into it, it's just another service that's just aggregating public data and information. And we were talking about one where really sharp young guy, but like just kind of showed the entry level point. A guy that's still in school came up with one of these,
Right.
and it's just going online, figuring out what data that you're interested in and then just aggregating it. And then it's like, then trying to figure out how to use it. But it's just one kind of element of a much more complicated system.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies right now that are claiming to be AI companies are really, there was a trend for years about web scraping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge with web scraping is you had to effectively go and find a website and you had to write code that would actually find keywords and find patterns and then scrape the data off of that. And that's where you see a lot of these like early stage, airline ticket companies that were trying to find and aggregate, deals. They were doing that. But then people now are using AI to just tell, obviously, their platform or program, this is the website, and then leveraging, OpenAI and other types of providers just to go ahead and lazily kind of, use AI's power to structure the data in a way that allows them to resell that data to other companies. And so it's not so much using AI to really add, any information or any value. It's more of just simplifying the way that we consistently get information and data. So if you're a company and your primary objective is to use AI to get data, anyone can do that, right? That's not necessarily the value add. The value add is on top of that information, able to bring those disparate sources of information to one central hub, which is kind of where we have, our application right now. How do we then bring about and surface the insight that allows us to discover patterns and opportunities faster than our competitors in a way that then leads to better outcomes? And obviously the whole goal of AI is to scale, right? Make it faster, make more of something versus just being able to do something in a new way.
Yeah, that's good. It's making me think, Brad, about just the reality that in our business, I think a lot of our competitors and just a lot of other people in the industry have historically not had a lot of data.
Yeah.
And it's part of it's because just how brokerage is set up. When you're working by yourself or independently, or even maybe you're just focused on within DFW, you're only focused on Fort Worth, or you're only focused on, maybe you're even only focused on like Frisco. And so you're going to have data related to that, but you're not going to really know, like, how does that compare to Grand Prairie or Arlington or one of these other municipalities or cities? And so when you can take the amount of data that we have accumulated, that's really different than just that public data that's available. So
Yeah.
to Tim's point, we do have that as well, but that's kind of what everybody can do.
Right.
Then it's what's the data that only we can aggregate and accumulate. And that's the conversations with the landowner.
Yeah.
That his information or her information, it's not anywhere publicly. Cause like publicly, nobody knows what their price is. Nobody
Right.
knows that they have to sell by a certain date. Like that's all, you have to talk to them, and that could change,
Right.
next quarter or the next time you have a conversation. But when we collect that data, that becomes really valuable. And so we recognize the need for the data, but being able to marry that up with the experience to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. If you don't have one or the other, then it's going to be difficult. If you don't have the data, it's difficult. But if you also don't have the experience and all you have is some data,
Right.
then you don't know what to do with the data.
It's funny because a lot of these AI programs that are happening right now in universities, they're combining their AI programs with the humanities and really with behavioral sciences, because human decision making is such an important factor to combine with AI, because we have to rely on sometimes human judgment to, differentiate possible outcomes, right? AI is great about being able to give you different scenarios and different paths, but AI is not thinking, right? It doesn't have risks, necessarily to worry about. And there's a lot of case studies about the paperclip problem and different types of challenges with AI, that if you don't give it parameters and don't give it really a very good prompt, which kind of Tim, you talked about, it doesn't really know to think about some of those things that you haven't told it about. It's not a person. It's a computer resurfacing information from the past. And if that past is not going to be like the future, or if the future isn't going to be like the past, then AI is going to lead you down some paths that you shouldn't go down. And that's where a human needs to come in and provide some information or some insight that maybe, is looking and forecasting into the future, things that haven't happened yet, to be able to get ahead of them. And you mentioned, too, like Tim, about just, there's a lot of data out there that AI is using, but it's really general information.
Yeah.
AI doesn't have access to information you've got to pay for. Usually it doesn't have information to county records and things that are behind paywalls. It's just getting information that you can get from Google. And so at some point, if you really want to have information that is rich and very nuanced, that's where you still have to go and do some, manual research, or you have to pay for some of those licenses and bring that data into the platform you're working with.
Yeah, I think right now, and probably for the foreseeable future, AI needs humans to lead it. And
Yeah.
I think the danger is sometimes we want to be led by AI. So we want to prompt it and keep following what it says. And what I've experienced with AI is it needs correction a lot. So a lot of times, like you're saying, I'll prompt it, I'll get a response, and there's value in the response, but I'll realize it's not thinking about this aspect. It's missing this part of the picture. So then I'll challenge it and I'll say, did you think about this? And I'll say, okay, I didn't think about that. Let me add that in. So I think it's very valuable if it's a tool and there's human leadership over the tool, especially in our business, because we have such a niche business. If you think you can design AI to lead everything so that you don't need someone who's an expert in the business to lead it, you're not going to get an accurate tool that can really help you. And like you said, you're going to be led the wrong way. So I think that nuance is really, really important.
Yeah. And I think too, just to add to that question or add to that point, a lot of time was spent 10 years ago, even by me, trying to learn how to write AI, how to make AI. And I think the bigger opportunity right now, and I've told my son this, who's 17, that it's less about being able to know how to code or how to write AI, but really more about how to communicate with AI, how to understand what kind of questions to ask it, how to frame out. And the importance that I'm finding is less about, programming, less about really kind of the design, and more about the overall engineering, being able to communicate the steps that you want AI to follow to give you back an actionable course that you can then go put to action, because AI can't do the acting for you.
Mm-hmm.
AI can just tell you the steps, but the person still has to go in there and complete those steps. And inevitably those steps are going to lead you down a number of different rabbit holes that you've got to be, thoughtful enough to know how to address and work through. So it's just an evolving thing. Obviously, it'd be funny to see what this podcast looks like in 10 years when we go back and look back and see how maybe wrong we were about our forecasts and our, small thinking about AI.
Well, and there's a couple of things I was thinking about that I'd love to get to. One will be just where do we think it's going to go, even in just the next 2 years?
Yeah.
Because it's gone, even just sitting here listening to you talk, Brad, thinking about this wasn't even really probably, and it's hard to remember the exact time frames, but on my radar like a year ago, I wasn't thinking every day about getting on a ChatGPT. Like, Tim, if you would have told me a year ago, like, you won't be going to Google anymore, you'll be going to something else.
Yeah.
That would be really hard, and maybe it was 18 months ago, but that'd be really hard to be like, really? Like that quickly? But the other thing, before we get there, because I'd like to get there, was Brad, you gave me a book, The AI Driven Leader, last year that has become, I think, bestseller, really successful book, but it's really what you're talking about. The guy, he gets into like how to prompt AI, make sure it's critical. That's what I'm always telling the guys here is we just did business planning here in our office, and the guys spent a lot of time putting together business plans. And so after they put those together, I said, okay, now I want you to go drop it into ChatGPT, but ask ChatGPT to be critical of your business plan. Like and it's okay. Like, no one's going to be there over your shoulder, like seeing it tear up your business plan. Like this just between you, and it's not always going to be correct, but like take that feedback and then get into it and interact with it. And every guy came back and said it was extremely helpful. They're like, there were gaps that I wasn't thinking about. It was really helpful. What was nice for me is I could read through all these business plans, and then I dropped all of them in at the same time and said, okay, compare the business plans. Where are they weak? Where are they strong? Put together. And it's like incredible analysis that you can get so quickly. And then you can drill into that even further. But that book was really helpful just to say even simple things like, if you're going to ask ChatGPT to review something, it'll come back with like 20 questions, and it just keeps going and it's just overwhelming. And so it's like, ask it to ask you a question one at a time, and just build from there. And I've done that now with a lot of different things, just kind of using it as like a thought partner, putting different things together, just to think that was available or would be available within the last year or two. It's incredible just how it has progressed. And even what you were talking about, I think it's so interesting that the way they developed it was to be so friendly naturally, that it's just kind of interesting in and of itself, a little bit scary too. Just like how it's like always a pat on the back.
It's smart because what they want you to do is stay in the program.
Exactly.
And so if it's friendly to you and if it's affirming you and it keeps asking you questions, we as humans, we want that affirmation. So it's like every time I prompt it, I get affirmed, and then I get another question and I can keep being affirmed. There's something that I think feels really good about that. And plus I'm getting information that is quality information that is helpful to me. And so I think if you're not careful, you can get sucked into that a little bit. And so I think that's why using it as a tool, not using it as like, this is 100% truth. This is a perspective. There's some value here, but not just sort of giving over decision-making power to ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you're using, but taking that into consideration, but then using your own intelligence and your own experience to really interpret that and get the value from it. I think going off your point, Tom, about where's the future here, I think we're still in a place, where everybody wants to adopt it. Everybody wants to use it. And I'm speaking of our business. I don't know that anyone really knows how to yet. And I think that when you hear people talk about, we have an AI platform or we have, we're using AI, I think a lot of it right now is just BS, but they might be using some version of like a ChatGPT type LLM, that may have some value, but I think actually really using AI the way it will be used in the next couple of years isn't really happening yet. But I would liken it to kind of what happened when I started my career back in the early 2000s. Email was just becoming a thing probably in the late 90s. And you had all these old guys who are super successful brokers that didn't want to do email. And so you'd still talk to guys like, well, I don't really do email. My secretary does email for me or something. And a lot of these guys didn't get on the internet. They wouldn't use any online platforms. And it was sort of like, I've been successful without that. I don't need that to be successful. And all those guys a lot of them are old, so, they weren't going to stay in the business anyway, but you couldn't stay in the business and not adopt email and using online platforms and all that. And I think we're going to see the same thing with AI is figuring out how do you use it. And it's not something that replaces us, but it makes us way more effective. It extends our capacity and our reach to be successful in the business and add value to our clients. And the companies and the brokers who can figure that out quickly, or maybe quicker than their competitors, are going to have an edge over their competitors. And there's going to be a lot of people, I would say maybe 80% of brokers, who try and act like it doesn't matter and think I can just do it all the same way and I can just use the same tools. And I think those people get left behind. especially because the younger generation will adopt all these things. And like you made the point about the young guy in college, and he's, presented us with something that could be very valuable to our business to add on to the factor. These young people are using these tools and they're thinking about that. And so you're going to get replaced if you're someone who's, my age, mid 40s or older, that just thinks I can just keep doing it the same way. I don't need any of that stuff.
Yeah, and that's I think you mentioned a good thing about just expectation setting. I think there's a couple different things that AI will have an impact on, both in our business as well as the way that we work outside of our business. In the sense that you're going to have landowners that are going to be using ChatGPT. They're going to have maybe even their nieces or nephews that are encouraging them if they're an older individual that's looking to sell their property. Rather than calling a broker first, they may go to ChatGPT and say, "How much is my land worth?" And now they're coming into the conversation with an expectation, maybe armed with bad information because they're not asking relevant questions, right? We may know, for example, the available use in that area, may know the zoning issues, we may know, certain due diligence aspects of that land based on other properties that we've sold nearby. And so all those things that we would know as a broker, we're now spending maybe some of our time at the upfront nature of the conversation of converting that landowner to list with us, just trying to help them understand maybe some of the things that they've been misinformed about because of AI. And so there's going to be an expectation that landowners will have coming into the conversation with you all that you'll have to be prepared for. And then even so, some of these analysts and some of these individuals that are joining the industry now, they're going to come with more information and more capability to get insight than maybe anybody else may have had, but they won't have that human judgment and that ability to understand just the behaviors that are involved, right? And how sometimes it may be very black and white in the data, but talking to a certain client or talking about a certain municipality, there's going to be some difficulty, and you kind of prepare yourself a little bit more than just walking in maybe overconfidently because you've got AI supporting you and encouraging you along the way.
That's a good point, because you could have good information in a general sense, but be completely wrong and go in the wrong way, but be super confident that you're right and not open to other criticism or open to other ideas. And I think for us, when you've been doing this for a long time, you've been in thousands of meetings and you made thousands of offers and done, I think we're almost over 1,000 deals now. A lot of times I just have a gut level knowledge just sitting in a meeting about the person I'm meeting with. Are they real? Are they not real? Is what they're going to do will it work or not? What they say they want to buy or develop. There's so many things that you just, we're able to process as a human that I think AI just won't be able to get there yet. And so I think the danger is thinking, like you're saying, someone who's maybe younger, early in the business, using these tools, but doesn't have that long experience to add to it, that you could actually be really confident and be wrong, which I think is really dangerous. I think we talk a lot about humility, in our business and for our companies, a really important value for us. Part of humility is being open to other people's opinions, being open to new information, being open to the fact that I could be wrong. I'm likely at least partly wrong. And so I think that's a big danger with AI, is if you start thinking very confidently in a certain direction, you're not open to looking at other options.
Right.
Brad, I was going to ask, with ChatGPT and there's other kind of competitors to that, do you see other ones that are rivaling ChatGPT? I mean, you hear about them, but then it seems like ChatGPT is still like the gold standard.
ChatGPT is definitely the most marketable. They do a lot. There's a lot of commercials. There's a lot of, promotion of that platform. It's been obviously the earliest adopted, but there are some good platforms. And again, I can obviously recommend some, but just for me personally, what I've found to be, really advantageous is using different AI platforms because they tend to specialize in different things. I found ChatGPT to be really helpful building out strategy. Obviously, if you can give it the right prompts, and again, it wants to answer your one question, in 17 pages at once. And I think that's where I had to learn how to communicate with it and say, hey, I want you to slow down. I want you to listen to me. I want you to ask me one question at a time, and let's build out kind of a plan. And so, that's kind of where I found ChatGPT to be most helpful, is just building out structure, building out work instructions, and thinking through the nuances, maybe, with my prompting of, be critical, give me some negative feedback. How would you approach this if you were a partner? Or how would you approach this if you were an employee? But then I found things like Claude are really great at being able to render visualizations. So if I want to create an app or if I want to create a chart for a presentation, and maybe there's a lot of information that I want to put in this piece, but I want it to be super helpful and intuitive and easy to use, I can give that prompt to Claude, and Claude will actually render an interactive, prototype of what that app or that chart may look like. And then I can take that information from Claude and I can actually put that back into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to help me think about how I could maybe build that out. So from a practical use case, not just relying on any one platform is going to help you, because there's other tools that are out there that help you with like research. There's some deep AI research tools. There's some Chinese tools that are out there called DeepSeek that are free to use, and they kind of claim to be like ChatGPT. And there's never going to be an end of opportunities to use AI tools. But I think being able to understand which ones work for you and understanding what their limitations are and their risks are is the first step. And then being able to put it to practice. I think that's where the AI-driven book was really focused on, just helping people take the first step into interacting with AI. And then I think quickly what you'll find as you begin to do that, you begin to find these little data points that say, hey, this is really helpful in this case. And then you bring about a different question or you bring about a different problem, and then it solves that problem. And you begin to build up this, acumen of how to use AI to really inform what you do. And it's funny, most people that begin that journey begin to apologize for it. Like, you even heard in some of our leadership meetings, like, I used AI for this. It's like, you don't have to confess that everybody's doing that. So it's not like it's a bad thing. It's really, you should be doing it because it's going to only help you be that much better at what you do, given that you've got the competency to do the job to begin with, right? If you're not, versed and skilled in relationship management and, managing your time and being, focused on getting better, AI is only going to go so far.
Well, and circling back to something we talked about earlier with the importance of having data, and Tim was talking about, ChatGPT or Claude, they don't have our data in there. But kind of looking ahead for us at DMRE, and I think this year, a big focus of the factor is AI. And so you've been working on for a while now, just a component of adding AI into the factor. So the factor we've talked about on the podcast is our proprietary kind of software application that we use in-house to do our business. And so you and your team have been working on Factor AI, which we're excited about, because we talked about, is there a way to integrate ChatGPT or something directly in? And then really you've come up with a way to create our own version of that and leverage a lot of that, but then do that obviously in a important way for us that's safe, secure, where our data is not leaking out because it's so valuable. And it's amazing, Tim, because when I started in the business and we were writing stuff down and it was like in Excel spreadsheets, it was like manual, kind of barbaric as it could be. and you were like, information is our value. Like information is so valuable in this business because non-disclosure state, we'll have people reach out for comps all the time, and we're careful how we let those out because it's like those are blood, sweat, and tears for us to get those comps. Now to think about how we've been able to go from like writing it down and having it in Excel to having our own platform, and then doing that as a group and a team. If it was just Tim and I for the last 15 years, we would not have 80,000 sites. We wouldn't have the data and the knowledge and the ability we have. And so doing it with 40 people all sharing information, and like you said, there's just now this multiplication effect happening with the data. So I think we're really excited about that happening this year and getting that added into the platform. And there's a lot of exciting spin-offs of that you're working on, whether that's having our own value for sites. And we've seen that with other people, and it's like so far off of reality and what things are really worth. But again, taking our knowledge and our data and being able to have an incredible like data vault, but then also Tim and I and other guys on the team knowing like what things are really worth, and then helping build the model that way. I think that's going to be where, to your point, Tim, how is it going to be used? What's going to happen? You're going to see some real breakthroughs in the space in the next short period of time.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing real quick before Brad responds. What's really powerful is not only do we have that data on all those sites, but we have all the data in the factor of all the offers that come in every single day across the state, and then all the deals that transact in all those markets. And so when you start thinking about AI can start to learn, okay, here's all the data, here's all the offers, here's all the deals that actually close. here's deals that fall out of contract. It starts to learn, to where you can start to make it more predictive and say, go show me where we should spend our time. What site should we look at, for these different kinds of uses? And like you're mentioning, even like what is the site worth, and why, and starting to build a case around that, AI, can start helping us do that. So I'll let Brad answer the question though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's where, as one of the challenges that we have is how do we take all the information that we have access to and get it in one place? That's step one, right? And then how do we use, these tools and platforms to really be a part of how we do our business, right? Because that's going to reinforce the use of that data. It's going to make that data more valuable. But we're rapidly approaching a point in time where we want to have our data really tell us what we should be looking for or looking at or doing, more importantly. So, where years ago it might have been, it'd be great if we could just get this data in one place, right? We've done that. And then it was like, what if we could just get all this data to look good or to, really be a part of how we operate? And we've done that. And I think the next phase and evolution of DMRE is, how do we have a situation where an employee comes in, sits at their desk, and rather than, opening up a map or looking at certain areas, they're just prompted with, here's the things you should be focused on based on your staff level, your role, maybe your key targets or metrics for the year based on different client preferences that you're working with. And so I think that's where it's not so much about leveraging AI to get the information to us. It's more about, well, now that we know what information is there and really AI knows what we do and how we operate, help it kind of further along the cycle so that we can actually begin to act on it faster. And that's, I think, the bigger step. Who can act the fastest on information, and especially in our industry where speed is such an important factor, is only going to lead to better outcomes for us and our clients and landowners. But more importantly, it's going to enable us to scale, right? If you've got 40 hours in a work week, potentially, if you're spending less of that time having to find sites and more of that time calling on sites or working with clients on opportunities or even underwriting opportunities for them to some extent and understanding the pricing and being able to compare and contrast, it's not about using AI to find needles in a haystack. It's about using AI to remove more of the hay so that people can find the needles faster, because our business is really dependent on, taking a lot of information and making sense of it. And AI is just not there yet to be able to make those choices for us. But like you said, if we can give you 80%, of the answer, and you can then take your 20 plus years of experience and kind of further polish that, that's far better than anyone could do on their own, and far better than AI can do right now.
I like that analogy of removing the hay to find the needles. And I think what AI does so well is it simplifies things, because you can get, for me, I can get so much data and so much information. It's all really valuable, but then trying to bring all that together and simplify it into actionable steps is where the challenge can come in, especially doing that quickly. And what I love about AI is if you can get really good data, you let AI simplify it, and then you can decide, okay, is this actionable or not? Or do I need to go back and relook at how I prompted it?
Yeah, I think the ability to prompt is pretty incredible with AI. And I think that's what's so different is with Google, you had to type something in that was so specific. And then if you go too long, you get all this weird results that are off topic. But with AI, you can actually prompt it like a person. I mean, my favorite thing to do with it is just do the voice recording function and just talk and do a big paragraph, get all your thoughts out, try to be comprehensive, like you said. Know it, because you just know if I leave something out, it's not going to know. So I've got to be as comprehensive as I can. I was thinking it could be an interesting point to kind of back up a minute. And Brad, now that you've been with us for several years and this was a new industry for you coming into real estate to run our technology platform. I mean, for you now, where things have gone so quickly within technology. I mean, there was some of this was already happening, but like it's just progressed so quickly. So what has it been like for you coming into real estate? And if you want to give a little bit of background on what you were doing before, that'd be great. And just that transition, and then just how rapidly things have progressed.
Yeah. So, I mean, backing up almost a decade ago, I was trying to figure out really what my next step was going to be in my career. And I had this kind of inkling I love stats. I really like building dashboards. I was at Fossil, the watch company, doing global ops and helping their leadership team kind of build out these tools to help them understand their global business. And I just Googled one time, like, what is a master's in stats? I had my MBA, And I found a program at NYU, and it was really on the cusp of this whole business analytics thing. And it was a NYU Stern's Master of Science in Business Analytics, and that sounded catchy. It sounded like, all right, it's got business, it's got analytics, it makes sense. And through that program and through the years that followed, spent a lot of time learning how to code, learning how to really think like an engineer and really build out the back end infrastructure. And it really exposed me to, the real value of being able to help people answer questions. That was kind of the overall curiosity, was that I was working with these executives at Fossil, and they had these really great, insight into the business, but they didn't really know how to solve the problem. And then you'd have people that were involved in technology that could build anything, but didn't really understand like what they needed to build. And that's where you had this consulting industry in the middle, where it was like helping executives communicate to, technologists how to, what they needed to build, and then help translate that. And that's kind of the space where you begin to see the business analytics industry begin to develop, is really the evolution of the consulting industry. And when I graduated from NYU, went into consulting and worked at PwC, or PricewaterhouseCoopers, in their intelligence practice. And we were a small team, an internal team, helping our U.S. lead partners and global partners use data and AI to really think about how they plan for the business. And just through that exposure and through that awareness, it really dawned on me that it was less about being able to be highly technical and really be able to build, state-of-the-art models, and more about being able to build things quickly and to be able to show progress and be able to take action fast. And that's really where I think AI and data science really, for me, really kind of hit the ground and really made it possible for me to, transition into DMRE so quickly, is that it was all about speed. And I think that if you're trying to solve a problem, there's a whole, debate around analysis paralysis. And I think that in our world, we're going to get to a point where there's going to be just too, overconfident action, where it's going to be like somewhere in the middle is kind of the, how do we, so it's like, back in the day, it was, we have so much information, we can't act. And then, I think at some point, Tim, is going to be, people are coming into the industry overconfident because they've got AI and they just know what they know, but they haven't really gone through the experience yet to understand that you can't always rely on the first thing you hear. And I think for me, it was being able to understand what are the needs of a business, what is, most impactful, and then really being able to understand that it's about ROI, and being able to show value. I taught at SMU, or Southern Methodist University, in their data science program for a few years as an adjunct while I was at PwC. And, a lot of my students were coming at it from a technical lens. And my feedback to them was, there's no right or wrong answers in this space. There's just better and worse ones. And your job is to really help show value fast, because these things can be built, in iterations. And I think even you, Tom, looking at my personality test, was talking about like, completion or execution was kind of one of those things that was difficult for me at times to, maybe on paper, but it's the philosophy that I've had is nothing is ever finished, in the space of technology. You're always developing, even factor, there's always another phase, obviously, if it's adding value. And so for me, it's about being able to add value, but knowing that when we go down that journey, there's going to be so many more doors that open, and we have to be committed to thinking pragmatically and strategically about what is the right next step, right? We can go and launch AI into factory a year ago, but if we're not really driving adoption and driving kind of an easy interface to work with, people trust the data, then, the AI is going to be limited, and the AI is only going to be as good as the data going in. And, I'm very confident that since all that past experience for me and all those things I learned along the way have only been fuel to help me think, how we can bring about, a real good platform to build on in DMRE. And then with these changes to AI and just the proliferation of tools and just how easy it is to access, those things are going to be just additional fire to throw on the fuel, or fuel to throw on the fire, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, you get a little sense of that when you were just talking, but I think we always consider you probably the Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man in the world. Just all the things. I mean, I actually forgot that you were an adjunct professor at SMU, but I knew that. But all the different things you've done, I think personally, you and your family, there's a lot of really blessings in your life. You have, I'll let you share, but how many kids you have, and then also just some of the opportunities you've had to serve together and give back to the community. And I think that was one of the things when we first sat down and we first met. We were looking for someone, but we were like, how are we going to find the person that has the technical skills, but also can speak the business language,
Yeah.
which is what you're talking about. And I think we just felt like that immediate natural connection when we met you about like, this guy understands, he gets it, but also just, we shared so many things in common, faith wise, value wise. And so it's been a lot of fun to get to work together. But
Yeah, no, it's been
I'll let you
great.
share a little bit more about the personal side of interests and purpose and different
Yeah.
things.
I mean, I wouldn't be here obviously if it wasn't for a lot of the personal stories that have kind of, gone into this journey for me in my life. And, number of kids is always a topic. It seems like it changes every year, and it's been a little bit more stagnant the last couple of years. My wife is thankful for that. But we have 9 kids, 5 boys and 4 girls. No twins. We're not a split family or a joint family. We don't have any adoptions. These are all biologically ours. And one wife. We married 20 years in August, so we're on that milestone coming up. And our oldest is 17. Our youngest is 4. And so we've kind of got the gamut of, we've got conversations about college next year potentially, and conversations about kindergarten next year, all kind of at the same time. And our kids are all very different and beautiful in their own right. And it's been a community that we've been around that's really just helped us flourish. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and not something that I'd planned on when I was 18, looking to embark on my my profession in college. And my wife has just been she's the superhero in the house, and I just try to tag along as best I can and stay coordinated with her. But yeah, I think it was honestly, in that pursuit of providing for my family that led me down the track of different educations. Again, I got my MBA when we had 4 kids because I felt this kind of burden to provide. And how am I going to differentiate myself as I grow my career? And the Lord opened so many doors in that time. We were also, looking to be missionaries, working with Muslims in our city and also abroad, and doing a lot of work with our church, the Village at the time. And we were kind of, almost like missionaries to the city of Dallas, working with refugee communities, and had a real heart for that. And so I was at this inflection point, even then, with 3 or 4 kids, of do I pursue full-time ministry? And I had an opportunity to be a missions pastor in that space early on, and really just felt through a couple different friendship groups, just this tugging on my heart of, God had something for me. And what if I was, idolizing what I thought to be, what I felt like was most godly over what God had for me in a way that was going to provide for my family and for others as well. And so just in the faithful pursuit and prayer for that, that's how I discovered NYU. And that's, that was the first door that was opened. And then behind that, it was, 4 more kids or 5 more kids. And with every step, I think, the insecurity creeps up of how are we going to provide? How are we going to do this? And, we have been so blessed and so fortunate by our church community and our friendship and just the faithfulness of Lord to provide for us in ways that we could have never imagined. So it's not the plan. It wasn't the plan to have 9 kids. It was just us, just putting every step, to the Lord and just trusting Him as we've moved on. And it was through our kids' school that I ended up connecting with a friend that connected me here. So it's just the way that these things work out is truly beyond, our planning and our capability.
Well, something that says a lot about you, Brad, is that not only did you work with the refugee community, but didn't you live in the refugee community in some apartments? And, so I think it's so cool to think about that, because so many people can say, "Oh, I went to a certain part of town for and help people or spent time with people, or I did this ministry," but to actually live among the people and to live in that context of within a refugee community with your family is just a completely different way to do ministry, and it shows that you're all in.
Yeah,
and that's just so cool. It says a lot about you as a man and as a leader.
Yeah, it was hard. There was we had our son. He was 1. We moved into an apartment complex in Vickery Meadow, which, if you're in the Dallas area, it's right next to one of the most affluent areas at North Park Mall. But it's one of the most highly dense areas of refugees in our city, really in our state, in our nation. We moved into an apartment complex called the Wildflower and lived there for a year. And we moved out of there just to a neighboring apartment complex a year later and lived there for about 2 years or 3 years. But we did work in that community for 4 years, mostly with Iraqi refugees that had resettled there from Baghdad, and just learned Arabic and began to kind of really immerse myself in that culture. Because, as you begin to kind of, begin to share your faith and share kind of the reason why. We were obviously stood out, like, why would people would see obviously our family and say, why are you living in this community? And for us, that was the conversation was we want to be immersed in that culture to understand how we can interact and build relationships. And it's just so hard when you live, outside of a city or outside of a community to kind of, commute in. It says more obviously when you go there, and really that's why I think where people that move overseas, when you move in and learn the culture and the language, everything is so immersed and wrapped around itself that it really does break down a lot of the barriers that may have existed before and really allows you to get to the heart of some of the conversations and relationships. So it was a real formative time for my wife and I, for our kids. My son, it's funny, my son now, he was 1 at the time. He's 17 now. And now he's a mentor to a refugee student, refugee resources in Dallas. And it's kind of full circle seeing him really take on that individual role of being a mentor, which, I was doing that 15 years ago. And so to see him doing it now it's a real beautiful moment.
Yeah, I mean, you've really been an ambassador for us up here, bringing different ministries for us to partner with as a company, and just because you've been so involved in the community, which has been neat. Refugee resources, the human impact.
Yeah,
it's been neat to get to know some of those ministries and support them. And it's fun to get to work with you because I know we've traveled to some of the same places and had similar experiences, different places. You're just a lot smarter than I am and know the technology side really well and have like 6 more degrees and 4 more kids.
Man, it's funny. I think about just like my risk aversion would never point to me having 9 kids and going to some of the places that I've gone. And it just feels like the Lord has done some things that I've kind of white knuckled myself, not wanting to do, but he's just kind of forced me into some of these uncomfortable circumstances. And it's funny because the more discomfort we feel at times, the more, we get to see the Lord in action, and we get to see that individual growth and the impact that he can have through us just being faithful.
Well, we've talked about having the 9 kids. Obviously there's challenges and financial burden. That's a ton of mouths to feed and just everything related to schooling and education. But then Tim and I come from a big family, having 7 of us total. And so we've talked about now that we're all grown up, just the legacy of that and just the blessing that will be. And so I'm excited for you. As I think when you first start working here, your youngest was like 1. And so you're kind of getting closer and closer. You're out of diapers now and just kind of.
I was going to say, you guys were in diapers for what, like probably 15 years or something like that.
Man. And that's another funny story, or not a funny story. It's a really amazing story. We actually had an anonymous diaper giver for a couple of years. Whenever I was at Fossil, we had 4 kids, and we started getting these cryptic kind of Amazon packages, that would have different sizes of diapers. And, it was, we finally found out that we got a letter that was like, one of those cutout letters where you couldn't really interpret who wrote it. And it was like, pretty much don't look into who we are, but we want to bless your family with diapers. Wow. And so we've been in diapers, for, we're still in pull-ups at night.
Okay, not quite there.
But I think we're on the final tail of that. Maybe a couple of years we'll be completely, nice. It'll be a sad day, but it'll be a happy day for me in my head, thinking about no more diapers for sure.
Yeah, that's true. You do. There's always the tendency to next phase, but then as your kids grow up, and you've seen that with your kids because you've had so many of them grow up, it's going to be sad to see them go out of that, no more toddler stage and all that.
Well, it's funny because I was just thinking about that recently, actually. I was like, man, we're going to have this, finally, the empty nest is going to be so peaceful. But I'm like, wait a minute, we're going to have grandkids, in our house.
Like right away.
50 grandkids.
My 4-year-old's going to be like 18. My oldest is like in his 30s. Like, I had 4 kids by then. I don't think there's going to be necessarily that much of a window where I can catch my breath. And it's kind of been funny, as the side quest that I've focused on in my life. I bought a school bus a few years ago. I've been converting that very slowly into an RV. And the joke with all my kids is that when they get married, they've got to sign an agreement that I can park the bus at their house for a month, because I'm going to have to sell my house and then, go month to month for the 9 kids. And maybe my wife and I will park at a national park for a few months to kind of pass the window of time. But it's just been it's a real sweet thing to think about the future, but if I'd be lying if I said I thought about it a lot. It's mostly about the day-to-day, who needs to get to what drop off and, that kind of good stuff. But it's just life. We all kind of have, if you have 1 kid or if you have, 9 kids, you're thinking about somebody else a lot, and you've got a real responsibility to invest in them. And that's really been the hardest part, is just understanding that each kid needs a different type of dad at times, and a different type of mom, and a different type of coaching, and they have different personalities. And it's funny, we've talked about how in our family we've spent a lot of time building our family, but now it's really about how do we cultivate our family. And that's been a hard lesson, because I think so much of your energy as a young dad or a young married couple is building a family. And then you begin to maybe start to realize at some point when the kids get older that there's I got to actually cultivate some independence in these kids so they can actually be, successful when they get out of my house. And we're going to have a lot different parenting style for our youngest kid when he gets to be in high school than we do right now. So we're kind of learning it the hard way. But our kids have been phenomenal. They're great kids. We've got great communities around them and great people, even in the company, that have just poured so much into our kids' lives. And so we're so thankful for that.
Well, I know if you have 1 kid or 9 kids, you're thinking about someone else, but I do think it's different if you have 9 kids. So I always humbles me because people are like, oh, wow, Tom, you have 5 kids. But it's like around this office, I can't be prideful at all because it's like I have half as many kids as Brad. So there's I can't say that's like a big family or anything, but
it's funny. There was I was a mentor at PwC to new hires that came in, and I'll never forget this guy. We had a web call, and I could tell he was stressed. It was, he'd taken a big transition in jobs to come to PwC, and he was just describing his family. And I kind of began to just pulse him, asking him some questions like, oh, do you have kids? And he was like, yeah, I've got 4 girls, and I immediately said, well, I've got 4 girls too. He's like, oh, so you get it. You're a girl dad. And I was like, well, technically I'm a boy dad. I've got 5 boys. And his monitor just went off immediately, because he was just like, I think it completely overwhelmed him with just because he was already stressed thinking about having 4 girls. And here's this guy with 4 girls that he could finally relate to that just trumped him with the 5 boys. And I don't think he ever recovered from that meeting, but it was funny to see it just wash over his face a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's neat. It's such a reminder of God's really blessed you with education, advanced education, professor at SMU, and then being successful in business. But then your family is so important to you.
Yeah.
And sadly, like I was talking to a guy yesterday that was just saying, within real estate, he was like, it's sad how many guys are, broken families, not together with their spouse, just have decided like we're gonna, and things happen obviously, but like there is this a lot of times almost the norm of. I just won't be home. I won't be available. I'm just going to be working because I need to make it. It's like, and a lot of times that starts with when you're young, it's like, this is the time when I really got to work, but it just never stops. And they never actually prioritize their wife or their kids. And so it's being around you and seeing you prioritize your family, seeing you do the school drop-offs. You'll come in and Spencer will ask you to leave Bible study, and I'll be like, Spencer, you got to let Brad have a break here. Brad's so busy. But so you'll come in and you'll be like, yeah, somebody will miss or be a little bit late because traffic was bad. You'll be like, yeah, I dropped off 5 kids this morning at 4 different schools and I was here on time to leave. And you're just like, okay, well, everybody better leave their excuses at the door. But it's been neat to be encouraged by you, see the way that you love the Lord, love your family, your work in your job. I mean, Tim and I have always been blown away by just how you're able to do so many different things so well. I mean, even the bus, we didn't get into the bus, but you're welding on the weekends and stuff. And just like I said, the most interesting man in the world from a skill standpoint. But more importantly, I think just it's who you are as a person, your faith, and your family. Because those are the things, we know that work will have its ups and downs, and it'll be good, it'll be hard, it'll be challenging, but our families are really what's more important at the end of the day than it's how we show up at work. It's our relationships, but the work it's going to be rewarding and it's going to be challenging. Like the family that you have is going to be such an incredible legacy.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys.
Well, thanks for coming on, Brad. I think this was fun. We've been saying we needed to have you on, and then you're always doing all the work behind the scenes. So we appreciate you.
I'll keep doing it.
You joining it. Well, thank you for doing that. And we're excited about, like we said, just some of these pretty big projects that I think we were talking about them somewhat hypothetically when you came on, and now it's like this is very possible that this could be the year for a lot of that.
So we've got the right people and the right vision for it. So let's just execute now.
Yeah. Well, thanks to our audience for listening. I think this is a really interesting topic. We'll continue to talk about and share updates as we're developing out the factor and just different things we're doing. Definitely connect with us. You can go to our website, DMRE.com, to learn more, or always feel free to reach out directly to Tim or myself. Very simply, Tim@DMRE.com or Tom@DMRE.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.